we have to allow humans to like experience these things and not be on a screen all the time. Like just really explore and learn and like see beauty. I don't know. I just feel this weird obligation to it.
Welcome to Behind the Stays, a podcast that shares the stories behind your favorite boutique hotels, short-term rentals, and hospitality brands, and the hosts, operators, and entrepreneurs who've brought them to life. Every Tuesday and Friday, you'll meet the military veterans, the retired flight attendants, the tech entrepreneurs, the school teachers, the single moms, the hoteliers, and real estate investors who are all, in their own unique ways, shaping the future of travel and hospitality. Discover how these visionaries from all over the world have built stunning landscape hotels in the mountains, designed bohemian bungalows on the beach, erected eclectic, off-grid, nature-immersed escapes, and so much more. Behind the Stays is brought to you by Journey, a first-of-its-kind loyalty program that brings together an alliance of the world's top independently owned and operated stays and allows travelers to earn points and perks on boutique hotels, vacation rentals, tree houses, ski chalets, glamping experiences, and so much more. And I'm your host, Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of the Journey Alliance. All right, friends, without further ado, enjoy the show. Carolyn Schneider doesn't just build hotel brands, she builds feelings. Before founding creative studio Corner Booth, Carolyn co-founded Casetta Group, the acclaimed boutique hospitality brand known for transforming forgotten roadside motels into soulful, design-forward stays that actually reflect the communities that they're in. But her journey started far from the boardroom, as a cocktail server at the Ace Hotel in New York, where she first experienced the magic of what a hotel could be when it's built with intention and feeling. In this conversation, Carolyn unpacks how her background in the art world shaped her creative vision, how she approaches brand building from the inside out, and why some boutique hotels manage to feel deeply personal while others fall wonderfully flat. You'll hear her thoughts on balancing timeless with trendiness, her approach to embedding local artists and narratives into each property, and what she's learning as she advises clients across the US and Europe through her studio. Plus, we'll talk about the real reason of why the front desk might be the most important brand ambassador of all, why copy-paste design is the death of boutique hospitality, how to create a microcosm of the community, even in a space you didn't build from scratch, her thoughts on parent brand versus standalone hotel brands, and where Casetta fits in, and the importance of building with soul, and what gets lost when you cut out the extras. If you're building a hospitality brand or dreaming up your next project, this episode is a masterclass in curating space, story, and soul. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Carolyn. All right, Carolyn, we are live. Welcome to Behind the Stays. How are you doing? I guess it's my morning. I think it's your afternoon or evening.
It's afternoon. Yeah, it's 3:45.
Okay.
Everything's great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
It is an absolute honor. I first actually discovered you through the Casetta brand, which I have admired for a while from a distance, admittedly. But I am super excited to hear your story and better really unpack kind of how you see the world. I think you offer a really fun, interesting perspective on hospitality. You've had a front row seat to some of the best independent brands, at least in, from my perspective, and helping kind of shape and build their vision. So there's a lot to cover today, but I actually thought it'd be fun to just kind of go back to the beginning a little bit and hear just a couple of minutes from you on why you're even doing this work. Like what inspired you at the start of this adventure to pursue hospitality?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people who get involved in hospitality just really love travel. So I definitely fall into that bucket. But yeah, the sort of original origin story is that I graduated from college. I went to NYU and I started working in art galleries. And I really love art and I loved being in that sort of like art museum gallery world. But at a certain point, I just got really excited about the idea of creating this sort of like 360-degree art experience, which for me translated directly into hotels where it's like you're living it, breathing it, you can eat, sleep. Like it really is the one space that like you can truly immerse in that experience. So I don't know, that sort of like clicked in me. And I think I already just, I love traveling and otherwise it just sort of clicked in me. And I decided to start working in, hotels and just sort of like learning more about what they were about and what parts I liked and how to sort of, pave my way through that industry. So yeah, I left galleries and I started working as a cocktail server at a hotel in New York at the Ace Hotel.
Wow, wow. I love that image, right, of sort of the hotel experience being like a gallery you can live in, eat in, move in. That's just a very beautiful image. And yeah, you mentioned kickstarting your true hospitality career as a cocktail server at Ace. You then went and worked at brands like Proper and Nomad, and then you were a part of the co-founding team at Casetta, which is just like a really like I think impressive arc in like a relatively short period of time. And now you're doing your own consultancy corner booth, which I want to talk about a little bit later here. But is there sort of this common thread? Is it pretty was it pretty linear? Did it feel linear at the time? I'm just curious how you think maybe like what the through line is between these brands and also kind of like your own development. I guess the development of your own curiosity and professional interests as you moved from one brand to the other to again eventually founding your own.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it did actually feel very linear and very strategic in a way. Although I don't know, it may not seem like that to the outside. And I think that's one of the things I actually really like about hospitality is that it doesn't necessarily require any sort of PhD. Although you can get amazing degrees from Cornell and all these great hospitality schools, but you can also just sort of figure it out. Depending on what you want to do within that world, but you can sort of just figure it out by working in it and climbing the ladder. And it's very relationship based, so meeting the right people who give you good advice and taking risks and bopping around a little bit. So for me, I feel like I learned the most about how I wanted to approach hospitality by working at these boutique hotel brands. And the reason I really got involved in hotels in the first place was that I was approaching it from that artful side, like I mentioned, and really wanting to create my own hotel brand. So I wasn't really just working at these hotels in order to just have a job. I was like really working at them strategically to learn more so that when it came time to build my own brand, I would know what I liked and didn't like and, understand the industry basically. So it was sort of just like working, but getting an education in it at the same time.
I always like asking people who have been pretty strategic in sort of like building their career, which it sounds like you very much were. I like to ask them, were there particular moments, right? So you're mixing a cocktail at an Ace Hotel, and was there a moment in that chapter that you took in a particular observation and said to yourself, when I open my hotel or when I launch my future hotel brand, this will absolutely be true as it is here at Ace, and or this will absolutely not be true as it might have been true at Ace. Was there a moment from your time as a cocktail server that has like stuck with you today and maybe is a strongly held belief today that you first sort of got inspired by back then?
I mean, so many moments, honestly. Like, I was just out of college when I was working there. So it was I was having a blast, obviously, working in a bar, basically. And just, I think one thing that definitely stuck with me is that I still have really good friends from that period,
Mm.
who work in hospitality still or don't, or somehow, or have like learned from it like I have. But I don't know, it was a very sort of like memorable time in my life and also in my career as that sort of stepping stone, I guess. So yeah, I think something that really stuck with me is like relationships are super important, and I've tried really hard throughout my career to, keep really good relationships and keep in touch with people and, just stay relevant into, everyone goes on their own paths, but staying relevant and like really keeping up those relationships and communication. So I don't know. I think that's part of it. Like being a cocktail server, I mean, it seems like sort of, unimportant, but it is such a social job. And so that
Mm.
sort of like established that element of it for me. And, also just like any role in a hotel from housekeeping to whatever, front desk to the general manager, it's like so much about making people feel at home. Like in the hotel setting, like that home away from home feeling, I think is super important. So whether it's like you just being a regular at the bar every Thursday and that's the place, or it's like you checking into a hotel year after year and really making that your family, I think that definitely clicked for me back then.
In the hotels that you worked at, were the restaurants and or bars owned by the hotel as well?
All different setups, actually.
All different.
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
oftentimes not. Like at Ace, it was different ownership for the restaurant. With Sedell Group, it was different ownership. Maybe there was some like crossover. Proper, I think, operated their own restaurants when I was there. I don't know what they do now. So,
The reason I ask is because I feel like I've, as a guest, and maybe this is just because I've become extra attentive. I've noticed sort of like this stark, maybe stark is too strong of a word, but certainly like a contrast between places where like you walk into this beautiful hotel, you have an incredible check-in experience, you get to your room, it's beautiful, then you go down to like the lobby bar, and it feels like a little bit like um, non-integrated, right?
right.
And I distinctly remember I had this experience recently at this great little boutique hotel in New York, and I couldn't charge the cocktail or whatever to the room because
Yeah.
it was different ownership, which was totally fine, like not that big of a
Yeah.
deal, but it was very interesting to kind of see sort of in this particular setting how the actual like literally like the culture seemed very different when you were sitting at the
Hmm.
lobby bar versus when you were interacting with hotel staff. And it was like to be candid, like the first time I had really thought about this, and I guess this is a long way of asking a relatively simple question, but is in your experience, how important do you think that is or isn't? Or is there a way to kind of build this seamless, integrated experience, even if the technical ownership of the hotel is different than the bar or the restaurant?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important. And actually, I remember specifically, even when I was working at Ace with a different restaurant group and a different, hotel owner, it was like always a sort of battle between the two. And the guests did feel it because the guests, let's say they wanted to order like a burger in the lobby, but the burger was only, able to be sold from the restaurant. And everyone was always like mad at each other because they couldn't figure out a way to make it work, sort of something that sounds so simple, but it does, end up affecting the guests at the end of the day. So yeah, I do think that's really important. I mean, obviously it's so challenging just business wise because there's so many different ways these deals are done, like every hotel or every hotel group has such a different method to the madness of like making the whole thing pencil, I guess you could say. So I don't know if there's like a solve for it. Like sometimes it is just going to
Yeah.
be two separate companies, but yeah, I mean, I would like to say in a perfect world, like what I do with Corner Booth is really so much about the guest experience. Like I'm helping to really creatively direct all of these different departments, but at the end of the day it should really trickle down to operations so that the guests can really feel this consistent experience. And yeah, I think in an ideal situation, like having both of those sides communicate really well and ensure that there's training that's like, cross trained across both of those companies is sort of super important. You can tell, you can see when it's buttoned up. Like I just stayed at the Lafayette in San Diego, which is part of the consortium group. And that hotel is
Yeah.
so incredible. I was just like blown away. It's huge. First of all, there's so many different outlets, like multiple restaurants, multiple bars, there's like a bowling alley. They're just like crazy, but you can just tell that it's like very consistent. The experience is very consistent. There was no part of me that was like, oh, this one's leased to this other company. Like they really feel holistic. So I think it's super important.
It wasn't that anything was wrong. No, not really. It was just, I don't know, life. The kids were young, so full of life and life, but always needing more. Their careers were oh so demanding, and it always felt like saying no was just never an option. And somewhere in between it all, they had misplaced each other. The bickering had become more frequent, the patience thinner, vulnerability a rare guest, romance something that they promised that they'd get back to eventually, but eventually never came until here. At first, it was just a drink at the lobby bar. It's designed so effortlessly intimate, it made conversation feel natural again. Then a slow walk through the garden up to their handcrafted safari tent where a cellist played a song that neither of them recognized but somehow felt like home. And then, without thinking, their hands found each other, without effort, without expectation. And suddenly, they were laughing, like they had on a second date at the coffee shop downtown that no longer existed. They were complaining about each other's mothers like they had on the cobblestone street in Rome under St. Peter's shadow. It wasn't an escape from reality. It was, in fact, their truest reality. It was them. At Journey, we're building a collection of stays that inspire reconnection. Do you know a hotel, a treehouse, a ski chalet, or other soulful property that has inspired you to reconnect? If so, share it with me at zach@journey.com. I think to your point a minute ago that from a guest perspective, it's like guests are very unassuming. They walk in, they don't know. Like the average person just assumes that, well, hey, you're like the bars in the hotel that you own. Like, why can't I charge this to the room? And I do think like from a I think this is maybe a technical solve is finding ways to, even if ownership is technically different, how do you work really, really hard?
Yeah.
It sounds like you do some of this work to help make the guest feel like this is one and the same. Because at the end of the day, if the guest does feel that way, everybody wins. And I think that's the goal. But
Definitely.
but I want to hear the story of Casetta. So talk, kind of take us back and from a outsider's perspective, again, somebody who has admired the brand for a while, everything about it, everything digitally anyway, since I have not yet been able to stay at a hotel. That's part of Casetta. But everything digitally is so well, or seemingly so well orchestrated and polished, and just quite frankly different. Like I think about the website even, and when you land on the Casetta website, it's like very different from like other hotel group websites. Especially like I love sort of, at least in its current iteration, there's this sort of like portfolio effect, and you kind of scroll through the different hotels like left, right, as opposed to up and down, which you do on most other sites. So, anyways, the web design critic in me has found a special affinity for it, for that aspect of the brand. But the brand is obviously so much greater than that. So take us back and just share that story with us.
Yeah, so I had this concept at the time. I was calling it Le Motel, which was sort of like a motel renovation concept, and I built out this idea of what I would want and where I would want to stay as a guest at a hotel. And there's just, especially in the United States, obviously, like so many amazing roadside motels, and this is now like 10 plus years ago, so a lot more brands are doing it now. But yeah, at the time, like there weren't that many motel renovation concepts. And so yeah, I was looking for partners or figuring out how to fund this project, and I was sort of deciding whether I could like lease a motel on my own and just renovate it and sort of like run it, convince a small family to allow me to manage it on own, or if I would raise money to, build a company. And anyway, just like figuring out how to do it basically. And I ended up partnering with a financial partner who had actually already purchased 3 of the hotels before we met. And so we partnered with them having the asset, and then me having begun to build out this concept to form what became Casetta as a brand and management company. And obviously, I ended up hiring a lot of really amazing people who helped to build the whole thing. And it's just, you're nothing without the team, obviously. Like, I onboarded amazing interior designers and graphic designers and creative directors and, all sorts of operations people and people to really like help build the dream. So I consider myself sort of like the conductor of this, company that I think I was able to, conceptualize and vision and then really like source these amazing talents to help bring it to life. And yeah, to your point with the website, I'm really glad you liked it. Obviously websites are a labor of love. It's just like everyone has an opinion and how they should look, and, everyone uses them. So it's like, you can't really escape a critic. But yeah, I think Casetta, like my goal and dream for it was always to have it feel really like handmade. And that I think that is sort of what sets it apart. Like it's a small team, and every single decision is made, with someone's sort of like soul. I know that sounds crazy, but just like it's really hand built, and so of course, like I was trying to build it in a way that was like operationally efficient so that we could like scale it to other properties. But like the property in Taos, I personally met all of these artists and helped to curate the whole, art program, and, really formed relationships with them in order to like get to know them and commission the work that would make the most sense. So I think that is part of what sets it apart, because it feels really personal.
On that note, I am curious, and I think that the Taos story is a great example here. What is that like when and you probably have a front row seat to this via Casetta, but then also just your work at Corner Booth. What's it like when you go into a community and you want to truly build something that's special and unique and also feels integrated and connected to the very place that it is? Boutique, hotels generally, I think, have a unique opportunity to be especially genuine to the place, because again, they're not worried about the brand standards that come with opening a Marriott hotel in said market, right? So what is like the community's reaction, and how do you go about like doing that? Well, it sounds like a lot of work, quite frankly, to go and figure out, all right, who are the tastemakers in this place, and how do we invite them in to be a part of our vision? Is there a story that comes to mind about how you guys did this well, and or even just an insight that you've garnered around what to do and what not to do when trying to bring something new into a new market to life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the parts that I really, really enjoy actually, because it's just like getting to know people and seeing what will work and, what they're into and what makes sense in the community. And I do think, tourism can be somewhat controversial for small towns. Like a lot of them survive off of it, but not all of them love having all the tourists around all the time. So it's sort of this like delicate
Yeah.
balance of how to really approach it. Yeah, and I mean, the hotels I did with Casetta were in smaller towns, so we definitely had different experiences in all of them. But the ones that I think accepted the project best were the ones where myself and my partners were able to really like, yeah, immerse and get to know the community and really spend a lot of time there and really get to know people personally, not just as like, the talking head at the city council meetings. Like I was just like really hanging out with people and introducing them. And I don't know, I felt like I was just making friends sort of. So that was really enjoyable for me. And also I think helped to benefit the project. But yeah, I mean, it's not, I think it also depends on the community and like what they're interested in. If you can offer something that the community needs and wants, then I think that's the way to go, versus just coming in and like stamping a big, I don't know, like corporate chain in a small town where they might just be like, why we don't really want this, why is this happening here? Like, I think it should feel much more part of the community. So
Well, when you think about, these, I think the unique role that independents have to play, and really the unique advantage, right, is that they can and arguably should serve as sort of like a microcosm of the soul of the community, right? Like, I think that's at least an objective that many people that I know who are interested in building these projects and or are building these projects are trying to keep in mind. And you think about it from a traveler's perspective, right? If I'm coming to a town I've never been to, the majority of my time is probably going to be spent in the hotel that I'm staying at, right? Like, I'll go out for the day, but ideally, like, I have a cocktail at the hotel in the evening. I'm sleeping, so that's 8 hours roughly, like a night that I'm there. I'm in the hotel room. I'm interacting with the staff, like, and so you want that very structure to truly feel like it's the best representation, or at least the closest approximation to the representation of the soul of the place. Because again, that's why I'm here, and that's also why I chose the independent over the chain. And yet, like, curating an experience like that is so hard, especially if the visionaries like yourself are not native to the place, right? I'm curious, are there like signals or frameworks that you look for, and or frameworks that you have found to be successful in helping to bring these visions to life, especially in a way that feels authentic, both to you, right, as the visionary, but then also the community?
Um, I mean, yeah, I think probably approaching a community from many different layers too, like not just from this, Los Angeles specific community perspective and like what those people are looking for, because, you know, that group might want one specific thing, but there's so many different levels and layers to a community where, they all might sort of need different things. So, yeah, I think just being really like holistic in the way that you get to know the town, and it's not just through, one demographic basically. Um, Really just trying to, yeah, get on the level of as many people as possible and like learn, and be really open. I think that's something that I've really enjoyed is like I don't know. I feel like that's something that I've always liked to do, that I can sort of talk to anyone and I really enjoy it, like any age group, and I don't know, any type of person, like I can find something that I really can like click with them about. Um, and yeah, I think that's important too, that you sort of like let your guard down and let your own sort of like past go and just like be in the moment with when getting to know people. I don't know. That might be like way emotional of an answer than talking about like how to build a property. But I don't know. I feel like I do feel really emotionally invested in all of the projects that I've been a part of, Casetta, other, like even at Ace, like I really have this weird emotional connection, and, also probably because it was a moment in time for me, but I feel like a really good boutique hotel brand has this way of like really having people connect to it in a way that is more so, it's less about just like checking in, and it's like you really have memories in that place.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think that is like the unique, at least opportunity, right? Is to walk in and feel something. And I
yeah.
think folks who are building these establishments have the unique opportunity to cultivate feeling, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and obviously that feeling can be relative to the guest, but I think it would be a big mistake if, you know, people walked into the lobby and didn't feel something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't, immediately smile or like immediately point something out, right? Like I think that is the magic that,
Yeah.
curators and creatives and entrepreneurs like you have the ability to do in these spaces. And I think that actually is what we need, right? We need things that make us feel something,
Yeah.
especially these days. And I think that that's kind of this unique opportunity that hoteliers
Yeah.
have to do.
And I actually, just to that point, I feel like that's when you can tell the sort of authentic versus the non-authentic, because so quickly does that whole world like start to unravel. Like as soon as, you have all the cool merch and the cool, collateral, but they're playing like an NSYNC song in the lobby, you're like, wait a second, this doesn't feel quite right. Like, not nothing against NSYNC, because that could work in a different brand, but it's like, as soon as one of those sort of like creative elements is unraveled, it just, you sort of like snap out of it, so I think that whole sort of like creative direction element is just so crucial, and it really shows like the true colors of the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's why you need a conductor like yourself,
Yeah.
right? Who can be aware of that and discern sort of like, okay, what is the proper melody here? And who's playing what instrument and how loudly should each instrument be played? And so I love that. I love that role in that categorization. As you've sort of worked in a myriad of other contexts, I'm curious, is there a story or two that you could share around a project that maybe like the soul or the story wasn't super obvious at first, and you had to sort of like figure it out or spend time sitting there? I once talked to a guy who told me like he like listens to the land, right? And I think
Hmm.
what I interpreted, at least of what he meant, is he'd walk the land and he'd spend like every day for like, a couple of months at different times of the day, kind of just walking the land and then just trying to understand like, what is the land telling me to do here, right? Which can to some seem a little hippy dippy, but I think that there's a lot of credence to sort of that thinking. Again, if you're building something emotional if you're building something unique. So do you have any stories akin to that from the projects that you've been a part of?
I mean, I think for me, always, I really love working with buildings that have some sort of story already built into them, just like from history.
Mm,
And so, even if the building itself doesn't have such a magical, illustrious story, there's definitely like story to be drawn out of it, whether it's like the street name where the building was built or the year or the materials that were used. And yeah, I feel like that's like easiest for me in a way to like come up with a story, whether it's the actual story or it's sort of like you know an invented story. I think like with Hotel Lucille in Silver Lake, our interior designers, Electric Bowery, helped to conjure up this idea of Peggy Guggenheim as a muse for this building. And the building itself is a church built in the 1920s. But we sort of
wow.
had Peggy Guggenheim in the background. And, we then had to like develop the story about like why she was even there in the 20s. It was all sort of made up. But then I think it helps to like source and spin the narrative a little bit and just like help to like drive decision making. So I don't know, I sort of like, I love writing. I'm like, I like sort of the creative side of coming up with stories even if they're not real. It's just fun to create like a little world. And yeah, to me it usually starts with like history, the building history.
I think that's awesome. I was talking to a small hotel group recently, and somebody who's on the executive team there. And one of the things that he was telling me was that they have like basically built this persona, and they have a name for this like character, and it's this is the brand is called Archer Hotel. I don't know if you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with them. They've got like 7 or 9 hotels. Anyways, they like invented this guy named Archer, and so like they like the staff like everyone asks themselves in any given moment like what would Archer do, and I think it was just it's such a cool like small thing, right? But like hugely significant. And what he was relaying to me was that it's helped their team just make like feel like they have the freedom to make way more decisions that
Mm-hmm.
otherwise would have been like passed up the chain, so to speak, because everyone has a good understanding of who Archer is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's become this fun thing where now people like justify like, would Archer do that? Like, yeah, he would do that, and here's why. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's at least for the staff just a really fun uh thing to get behind, and quite frankly, as a brand pillar, really help sort of solidify that kind of unity of thought and unity of how the guest experience should feel. So
Mm-hmm.
I,
I
I, I
like
loved
that.
that as a concept.
Yeah, that's awesome.
do you How do you think about a parent brand and then the individual hotel brands? Like the Casetta hotels, everyone looks, at least from my perspective, like different, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure that was very intentional in your work today, in your work back then. How do you sort of think about brand integration, or how important is that to you? Or is it really just important to nail the individual brands of each hotel, and people could care less about the parent brand? Or give me your thoughts on that.
I think it totally depends on the brand, and like what the goals for the brand are. But with Casetta and with another client that I'm working with right now, I think it is important to build out that sort of parent brand. Just even from a marketing perspective, I don't think it needs to be like an in your face sort of like stamped on every door Hilton type of brand, but just to have that sort of thread through all of them so that people start to understand that they're part of a family. I really like that approach that doesn't feel cookie cutter, sort of like Shelter Social Club sort of does that too. I don't know if
Mm,
you know that one. But like you can tell there's part of the same family. You understand that if you love staying at one hotel, you'll probably love staying at another one. But you still get a completely different experience. It's not like the Starbucks experience where you're just, it's not it's not like a complete copycat of one another. So I don't know. I really like that. Also, I've found that it has helped just like in the development, like when you're trying to develop so many small properties at once to be able to come up with standards. Like we always use this bathrobe, we always use this notebook, we always use this, template for the website or whatever. And then you can more easily customize them versus completely coming up with something from scratch every single time, which is obviously like so much brain power and just labor and money. So I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I sort of like that approach, but really putting all of the energy into making each property feel like it has its own story.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that the people that execute this really well, you end up, I think, as a consumer, trying to figure out if there are other hotels in that portfolio and then being pleasantly
Yeah.
surprised when you find others simply because you're like, oh my gosh, this was such a great experience. I actually
Mm-hmm.
had an experience like this at the Manchester in Lexington, Kentucky, which is a newer hotel. And right now it's, it's their only hotel. But like I immediately was like went to the bottom, I was like, who's the parent company? Like, how do I find other
Yeah.
like are there other Manchesters? And
It's
turns out there
perfect.
aren't yet.
That's their dream.
But
That's probably
like
what they want.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And they've established something so unique and beautiful and exhilarating. Carolyn, do you obviously story driven properties and this idea of like figuring out what the soul of a place is and then trying to deliver on that from a design standpoint, from a services standpoint. This is something that everyone kind of talks about today. Maybe when you first got started in this space, it was less of a hot topic of conversation, but it's certainly talked about today. Are there mistakes you see people make? Are there attempts to make something story driven or feel soulful or feel genuine that just kind of like really fall flat? And if so, like why do you think the falling flat happens? Why do you think maybe an inauthentic story might get told? Anything that you've learned from your work on, I guess, things to avoid or be wary of when trying to bring a story driven brand to life?
For me, I really believe in timelessness and the classic approach. I think um, I personally don't feel connected when I stay at a hotel that feels too like trend driven.
Mm,
Um, it just feels like it's going to get stale and it just feels like people sort of, wanting like it's like clickbait or something. Like I don't know, it just doesn't feel real to me and it just you can tell that it'll expire quickly. So I guess that's something like, yeah, I feel much more connected. I like being surprised. I don't need like the, it's not really like about being traditional. It's more being timeless so that there's still ways to show, really beautiful, like innovative design and that sort of thing. But that the staples are the staples. Like I don't personally need like a kiosk check-in or whatever. Like I would rather, try to stick to some of the standards in that way of at least like from the guest experience perspective. And yeah, to me, like you can, I don't know, it depends. Like not all travelers are the same, but like if you're sort of into boutique hotels, you can feel when it's just a big like corporate chain that's just sort of copycatting something. It just doesn't
yeah.
feel like it's real. And I think now that, boutique hotels have obviously been around for so long, but that it's so much more common. I feel like mainstream culture more understands like interior design these days. And it's more part of like Instagram culture, interior design and boutique hotels are more part of mainstream culture that it's like, easier for there to be diluted product, but that I think the savvier travelers are the ones who can really tell the difference between the real deal. And a lot of it does come down to the front desk and training, like having people who are really those ambassadors for the brand who can give recommendations, when you get outside of the hotel doors that really follow and are in line with the hotel brand's perspective, I think is another way to sort of see it. It's not just someone who's like clocking in, clocking out and telling you to go to like Jack in the Box down the road if that's not really what the brand is. Like they really live and breathe it, understand it, like know who their guest is and what that guest will like outside of the walls of the hotel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like what folks should do is train the front desk staff to, I mean, everyone should just go and Google, okay, what are the top 10 restaurants or bars in like our neighborhood? And then your recommendation cannot be one of those 10
Right.
or something like that, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
consumers have these recommendation engines. We all do, sitting in our pockets, right? All the
Hmm.
time. And so if we're asking, it's because of course we've already looked, right?
Hmm.
And or we'll still look and verify. But like I had this experience actually at the Fifth Avenue Hotel in New York a couple weeks ago, which is a great independent there. And at the front desk, I asked the gentleman where I should go to dinner, and he was like, "Okay, well, everyone says you should go to Steakhouse
Hmm.
X. I think you should go to Steakhouse Y." And I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, okay, tell me more.
And
Why?" And literally like he gave me some relatively fluffy answer, to be honest. But I was
Mhm.
like, "Who cares? I'm going to
Yeah.
Steakhouse Y because he told me I should go there, right?" And sure enough, I did, right? And it was great. But
Yeah.
but those are the experiences where like from a guest perspective, you're delighted. You feel like you got more value, and it's something that a person told you and not Google. And like
Yeah.
it makes you feel like you're on more of a wild adventure actually, because you didn't read a bunch of reviews about the place. You literally talked to one person and trusted his judgment, and you trusted his judgment because of the hotel that he worked at,
Yeah.
and your experience of the hotel thus far. So
Definitely. Yeah. Some of my favorite trips are just like checking in, feeling really excited about the hotel. It's maybe in a neighborhood that's not, the most touristy, but then, yeah, asking at the front desk and going to the local spots, and you feel like way more connected to the place as well.
yeah, yeah. Do you in your work, are you ever approaching a project from a perspective of, hey, we just have this land and we want to build something new? Are you usually, is there usually already a hotel sort of in place, and there's a new ownership group that has come on board, and you're sort of like reviving the soul of the property? Like, are you doing ground up? Like, what is sort of the core, I guess, your core project? I'm sure it's wildly different because you have this awesome studio and you work with a bunch of different clients, but what does sort of the core project look like?
I mean, I think my favorite type of project to work on is definitely that sort of adaptive reuse project
Mm,
where it's like a property that just has so much potential and hasn't met it yet. Like I'm working on this project now in Spain that's like this insanely gorgeous old palace. It's like it was a house, from the 1700s, but it just has been sitting there without anything for all these years. And it's
wow.
so gorgeous. And just like, I don't know, I feel this weird obligation. Like, someone needs to do this. And I feel like I'm the one. It's just like, I don't know. There's this, especially in the US, I mean, well, I guess I should say it's more so in Europe. Like there's just so much amazing story and history. And then in the US, of course, we do have, some of the same, but when they've just been like underutilized, it feels like
Yeah.
we have to allow humans to like experience these things and not be on a screen all the time. Like just really explore and learn and like see beauty. I don't know. I just feel this weird obligation to it. But that being said, I mean that's the type of thing that I get just like really excited about. But I think like my clients are all different and all in all different, phases of development. And I think they're all really fun in different ways. Like it's interesting going into like a corporate building that, seems sort of unassuming and, boring, I guess you could say, and then creating something super magical inside that draws people in. And it's this like surprise moment. So I think
Mm,
there's so many different ways. It is really about that though, like getting people sort of happy and excited, to walk in a space. I think I love that sort of creating a little world feeling, no matter where
yeah.
it is.
Have you seen, because a lot of folks, right, will say, hey, this, we want this property to have a soul. We want this property to tell this particular story. And then, right, when push comes to shove and you're looking at costs, right, and margins are thin, like it can be so hard, right? I think.
Hmm.
And depending on who you talk to, right, the easiest thing to cut could be these quote unquote extras, right?
Yeah.
These experiential hospitality components that you're working into the space. And yet, right, I think you would argue, as would I, that like that those are like that's the heartbeat of the place. Like you rip that out, right, and you lose the vibe, or you lose the very thing that could make this place special. Have you seen sort of a change in perspective and or just a willingness to invest more in, and I don't want to say like things beyond table stakes, because I think that many of these things are actually fundamental. But have you seen a shift in behavior in terms of how folks think about investing in these things in your time working in the space?
I think that, people really understand the value of a good boutique hotel, so they are willing to invest in it, and that's great. But, at the end of the day, the project is only as good as your partners. I really think that the people are so important, the people that you're working with, that there's like a good energy between the team and that people are excited. And, there's obviously construction and development are always super stressful, but I think, finding the right team to work with is so important. And again, like really keeping those good relationships, it sort of all comes back to that. So yeah, there's like a lot of trust involved with this stuff. Like not everyone values the same things, but I really think in order for these projects to have that personal touch, it's like, yeah, you do need to work with these local artists and pay them, what they're worth, not lowball everyone. And it's so important to, invest in those like details.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that what I've seen, at least, and heard from folks, is that folks that build these hotels and do it right with the community is so much more receptive to it. And you actually do want, it's good for business, right, to have a community reputation. You want folks to come after work on a Thursday, like you were mentioning earlier, Carolyn, and have their happy hour at your place, right? Like such a validation for your team, such a validation for the space, especially on weeknights. And I think about this incredible hotel called Hotel Vermont, in Burlington. And I think like they're a quintessential example of this. The team there has done such an exceptional job. There was a lot of, I guess, initial hesitancy to the project for lots of valid reasons. And, it was also in Vermont, where people like to share what they think about, everything all the time, which is great. Anyhow, the project ended up going through. It took off, and it's really become the spot in town where locals go. And they say to date, like they have, an even better reputation with the local community than they do with guests sometimes. And I think like that's a win. Like that's what you want,
Definitely.
right? And which is a contrast to some of these other stories that you hear.
And
So,
that's really hard to
well,
achieve.
Carolyn, I've got like,
I was just going to say,
sorry.
really,
Finish your
no,
thought.
that's really hard to achieve. And that's what guests actually want at the end of the day too. So it just like helps the whole circle, like guests want to book where they feel like they're part of the scene. So it's nothing but good comes of that. So
Yeah, there's nothing worse than like being in like the lobby bar and realizing you're just surrounded by a bunch of tourists.
Totally.
Even though you are
Exactly.
a tourist,
You're like,
right?
get me away
You're
from
like,
them.
why are they here? Well, I've got kind of just one final question for you, Carolyn. Is if my internet sleuthing serves me correctly, you've graduated, if you will, from Casetta, and you're doing corner booth now full time. Do you think you'll ever like start another hotel brand? Have you I'm sure you've thought about it. Like anything you care to share on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally open. I'm like someone who's just open to experiences that, that come and like when the time feels right. So yeah, I would never say no to any opportunities. Like there's just so many fun projects to work on, it sort of like depends on the right fit. But yeah, I really enjoy my work with Corner Booth just because I am able to really diversify the types of projects and my partnerships, and it just is like a much more open book than sort of like sticking to, one specific partner and story. So it's fun. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I might have something going on in Spain soon, and there might be more projects that come from that as well with, different partners. So always open. And
Well, amazing.
that's what's fun about hospitality. It's like you can just go in so many different directions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't wait to see what you do. I'm sure anything you touch will be gold.
Thank you.
It's you've got a very impressive record to date. And oh, actually, I lied. I do have one final question. Corner booth. What's the story behind the name?
Oh, well, sort of specifically just a corner booth. It's like my favorite spot. I always say it's like the best seat in the house. It's like people watching. You can sort of like cozy up with a date, or it can be a business meeting. You can like bring all of your friends and squeeze in. And I don't know, it's just always a good vibe. I love that spot. You always feel special when you get seated in a, when you're sat in a corner booth, you're like, okay, this is it. Like it's a good night and it just feels fun. And I love that sort of energy and excitement of like getting the best seat in the house.
I love it. And even though I didn't know that was the story behind it, I that was the first thing I thought of. It was like, oh, well, like corner booths are like the best seat in the house. So great work on the branding and positioning. It's a fantastic name.
Thank you.
Well, hey, I'm super thankful for you taking time out of your very busy life to spend close to an hour with me. Really appreciate you sharing your story. If folks want to connect with you or if they have a project in mind that might be a good fit for Corner Booth, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, my website, corner-booth.com, email hi@corner-booth. And yeah, I would love to chat that way.
Wonderful. And to make it easy for everyone tuning in, I'll have those links in the show notes below. Carolyn, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I love that we're wearing the same outfit too. I sort of noticed that midway through.
I know.
We're in uniform. It's so good.
Yeah, I do that with all my podcast guests.
Like, get ready.
Yeah, we coordinate ahead of time.
All right, thank you.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram @BehindTheStays or send me an email at zach@joinjourney.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@joinjourney.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at joinjourney.com/alliance. Again, that's joinjourney.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.